Body number 3, I grimaced, wincing at the stench. Chris Dunham, age 17, stabbed through the chest 47 times with a piece of ceiling pipe, an additional 23 puncture wounds visible on his legs. His head appears to still be lodged in the ceiling. And the harrowing detective finds another gruesome scene, Izzy called, gesturing to herself. A third body has fallen from the ceiling into plain view. Can she find the killer before it's too late? I sighed and took a step back, seeing Lilith on her knees on the floor, looking up along the length of the ceiling. I walked over to her steadily and stopped beside her, taking a knee. Her gaze flicked to me as I spoke. Anything of interest? Do you really wish to know what I'm thinking? She spoke, her eyes leaving mine as she rose to her feet again. You're not just going to jump to conclusions based off simple observations. I'm not Izzy, I laughed. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I have my own theories. You just look like you've got something on your mind. Maybe if we work together we can figure this out before someone else has to die. Her eyes again met mine and she studied me for several seconds in silence before she nodded softly. I was simply wondering, why this one? She questioned. What's that? I asked, watching her eyes search the room. Well, I tried to hide this one, she continued, her gaze flicking to me. The murderer left the other 2 out in the open. Strange to have attempted to hide this one in the ceiling. And we don't have any context for this one, I sighed. He was discovered by a group of girls when his body collapsed the ceiling tiles below him just a few minutes ago. All we really know is he's likely been dead since before the assembly, since nobody saw him. Lilith nodded in agreement, continuing, he was likely killed around the same time as the first victim. That case was actually a double homicide. We just hadn't discovered the second body. This is getting elaborate, Penny stammered out as her and Mark approached. If we don't find the killer soon, we'll find them, I spoke confidently, my fists clenching. We just need to figure out how all of this fits together. I have an idea, Izzy suddenly spoke, grinning from ear to ear. I've changed my hypothesis. Wait, Mark cried in panic, his mouth splitting open in a horrified expression. Me? You guys are insane. Back the fuck off. No, Izzy thought aloud, her eyes scanning our faces. For the murder of Max, other than Penny, who was the only other one without an alibi. My gaze flashed to Mark. You guys are off the rails, he screamed, backpedaling. I refuse to be falsely accused. When Penny discovered the body, I stammered. Mark, you were the only one left in the room. You could have easily planted the note before she returned. Mark's teeth gnashed, his eyes blazing with fire. Not only that, Izzy continued, you had a motive. Max was the only one protecting you from suspicion for the first murder. He was your one and only alibi. If you were intimidating him into telling your story and he was about to crack under the pressure of keeping your secret, you would have had no choice but to take him out. This is bullshit, Mark cried, backing against the wall. I would never. I'm sorry, but this information is undebatable, Izzy continued. Thanks to Max's very existence, you had an alibi for the first murder, a motive to kill him, as well as a reason to take the risk and steal the piece of paper, not realizing Penny's backpack would have contained some. Mark gritted his teeth, his skin flashing pale. And that's not all, Izzy continued. Weren't you the one who seemed most desperate out of all of us to get out of here? And you knew I was alone in the bathroom, Penny cried. Back when we were investigating it, you said I was the only one to have admitted that I was alone in there. I never mentioned how many people were with me. The only way you would have known that would be if you were the strange person who ran in. You were trying to wash off the blood. I just assumed, Mark screamed in horror. I can't believe you guys are using that against me. Either find some concrete evidence or go to hell, he shouted, whirling around and storming off, calling out over his shoulder, I refuse to take this bullshit. I sighed heavily, glancing at Izzy to see that her maniacal smile had widened in assurance. The only way to tell once and for all is to investigate the handwriting on the note, Lilith spoke. It's too soon to tell anything yet. So, we can be assured that Max was not the one to write this note, I pondered carefully. The handwriting is completely off. I'm back, Mark stammered, presenting the handwritten assignment of pennies we had told him to go get. This essay from last semester was all I could find in her locker. The last page is missing, but it should be more than enough for a comparison. Lilith took it from him, scanning it carefully before showing it to Penny. Can you confirm that you did in fact write this assignment last semester? Penny nodded slowly, her form tired and weak, her breathing beginning to become frantic. She went to blurt something out, but Izzy cut her off, grabbing the paper from Lilith and stating, The handwriting matches perfectly. Penny cursed under her breath, her eyes widening as her hands flew out in front of her. I didn't write the note, she cried. Isn't it possible that someone forged my handwriting? No, Izzy snapped. Just fess up already. It's not only possible, Lilith stated, yanking an angry hiss from Izzy, but quite likely that someone would have tried to frame you. And only one person had the means to do so, Izzy cried as her eyes lit up. Only one person would have had access to assignments written by you, Penny. When you went to look for Max, Mark was left alone in the room with your backpack. He could easily have looked through your backpack for an assignment from you and copied down your handwriting to forge this note. You just contradicted yourself, Mark snapped, taking a step forwards. If I knew the backpack was in the room, I wouldn't have needed to steal the piece of paper from the other class. Izzy's eyes narrowed, her teeth gnashing. He's right, I stammered. Plus, we checked her backpack and nothing was out of place. Also, Callie stammered, there's still the matter of the third body. We have yet to determine why the first murder was a double homicide and why the killer tried to hide that body. There's not enough evidence to convict Mark or anyone else. I have a hypothesis about that, Lilith stated coldly, her eyes flashing to me and nodding. But for now, we need to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt who it was to write this note. Perhaps that new corpse will give us some clues. We should investigate further. We are running out of time to find the murderer. Well, I'm done with this fucking group, Mark shouted. I got that essay from Penny's locker to prove my innocence, and all you guys did was turn it against me. I won't be part of this fucking witch trial. If you need me, I'll be somewhere far away from you lunatics. Goodbye, John. He stormed off, and I watched Izzy's teeth show as her lips curled into a light grin. So, what did we learn? I asked, walking into the room where the body had fallen from the ceiling. There is nothing else here to learn, Callie stated slowly. We've been here for a long time and figured out nothing. This third body is just far too mangled to make out much of anything. What did you guys find, John? Penny asked before her eyes glanced behind me. And where is Izzy? Weren't you guys going to check the upstairs lockers one more time for clues? She told me she came back to help you guys, I spoke, my eyes widening as I scanned the room and saw her nowhere. I haven't seen her since we split, Callie stammered, meeting my eyes. Lilith agreed from the corner of the room. We have not seen her here. Shit, I cursed under my breath. Just what was she up to? We have to find her, I stated, turning to leave the room. If there's nothing else to learn here, we should go. That's not true, Penny stated slowly, kneeling down beside the messy carcass and narrowing her eyes. Something looks off, and the way the murderer tried to hide him. Maybe it's the case that... She was cut off as Izzy staggered into the room, her dull eyes swirling with pink sludge as her bloody hair fell in front of them. She was limping and clutching her arm. There's another body, she stated. Victim number 4. I spoke slowly, my breathing shallow and horrified. Mark Valencia, age 18, appears to have hung himself in room 17B. The body dangled horribly, its neck at a strange angle. He appeared to have jumped off the ladder that lay propped up in the center of the room. His corpse swung slowly, back and forth, dead, vacant eyes looking through us. I found him here at 7 o'clock, Izzy stated. Just 2 minutes ago, I immediately ran to tell you. All of our eyes almost immediately narrowed on her. Izzy, I spoke slowly, you understand that you do not have an alibi, correct? It seems unlikely that Mark would have truly killed himself. What were you doing when you split from me? Callie and Penny both reported that you didn't ever show up. Why did you lie to me? I was wrong, she stated. I made a rare mistake, but I didn't kill him. I believe he really did kill himself. A voice suddenly spoke up from inside the room. It was a short boy with curly blonde hair, standing beside a taller boy who nodded in agreement. We were near the supply closet, the other boy spoke. We saw Mark run to it by himself, clutching his head and pulling out the ladder. When we asked him what he was doing, he told us he was leaving us, that he was going to get out of this nightmare. The boy shuddered. I never thought he meant it like this. The blonde kid took a step forwards, continuing. Izzy wasn't with him, but she arrived a few minutes later asking us where he had gone. She was with us up until the time we discovered his body. She couldn't have killed him. Izzy, a voice suddenly screamed from a room down the hall. You better check this out. We all arrived in the room to see a group of girls gathered in the center, looking up at the ceiling. Lilith and I arrived between them all, gazing up to see that one of the windows was lightly shattered, a spiderweb crack splintering across the surface. There were also faint blood speckles on the floor, some directly under the window, some in the corner of the room.
All right,
A voice suddenly boomed over the intercom.
let's hope our investigators have enough evidence to make a case. The trial begins now.
My limbs flashed with ice, my heart stopping. This wasn't enough time. We had just discovered another body. Could we really narrow it down to a culprit by the end of the trial? Or would we all be killed? Lilith and I locked eyes, mine horrified and wide, hers plainly calm and stoic. I took a deep breath, pulling my hand from my lengthy sleeve before extending it out towards her, closing my mouth and forming a light smile. Let's do this. I'm going to need your help. She slowly took my hand, what appeared to be the makings of a smile twitching at the corners of her cold lips. Let's, she stated, nodding. All right, the director called. John, your goal is to prove beyond a doubt who the murderer is and convince the rest of the school of its truth. I will act as the informal judge. You may choose your witnesses and partners. I nominate myself. A quiet yet firm voice spoke from the crowd. I turned towards it, expecting to see Izzy, yet being surprised as Lilith stepped forwards. She walked up onto the stage and gave me a nod, before her eyes crawled with hideous turquoise and she faced the director, continuing, "But unfortunately, I will not be his partner. I will be debating against John." My chest squirmed, my breath catching. "I have determined the murderer," she spoke, "although I'm certain John will not agree. He is perhaps a bit too personally invested in the aforementioned killer. If he will not allow the true murderer to come to light, I have no choice but to fight against him. My name is Lilith, and I will convince the school of my side." The director smiled widely, his hands gripping the desk. "Exciting!" he cheered. "You have your wish, Lilith. You may invite your first suspect to the stand." "Yes, Your Honor," she spoke, taking a stand opposite the table from me. "I call Penny McClure to the stand." My lungs flattened, my teeth gnashing. Penny worriedly stepped onto the stage, her hands shaking violently as she stood in front of us, her pale skin radiating a sick green. "I would like the class to take a look at this girl," Lilith spoke, standing up and beginning to pace around the floor. "Someone without an alibi for the first, second, or third murders." "Objection!" I cried, slamming my fists down. "Overruled," the director smirked. "Please continue, Lilith." "After the murder of Max, Penny was seen placing a note in her own handwriting that was meant to be from him." She faced the crowd before continuing. "In an attempt to cover the fact that she had written it, she snuck into a different classroom and stole a piece of paper. She made no attempt to cover her own handwriting, because she planned all along to frame Mark, the fourth victim." "Objection!" I shrieked, standing up. "Sustained," the director smiled, gesturing to me. "That was an awful lot of unsupported claims you just made, Lilith. Let's see what John has to say." "There is no evidence to suggest she ever attempted to frame Mark," I cried. "That claim is completely unwarranted. In addition, if she planned to frame Mark, why kill him off hours later?" "She did not kill Mark," Lilith spoke. "Mark killed himself." "You're wrong," I cried, causing her eyes to snap wide. "Mark was clearly murdered by Izzy." "Objection," Lilith snapped. "Overruled," the director waved, looking at me and nodding. "I call Izzy Martinez to the stand," I spoke, watching as she stormed up to the stage in a rage, her pink ponytail swaying behind her. "Izzy, we already checked the upstairs lockers multiple times," I continued. "Your suggestion that we go through them again was strange from the beginning." Her eyes narrowed. "And then you lied to our group," I continued. "You went off the radar for a long interval of time. By the time you returned, Mark was dead." "False!" Izzy gnashed, whirling to face me. "You are forgetting that I had an airtight alibi during the time Mark hung himself. I was with 2 other people who watched him take the ladder he used to hang himself." "That information is irrelevant," I hissed. "There is still an interval of several minutes from when Mark took the ladder to when you showed up. That is plenty of time to have staged his suicide." The room fell quiet, and I watched her hands begin to shake beyond control as rage slowly took her heart. "Fine," Izzy shrieked, slamming her fists down. "I tried to kill him, okay?" My breath caught. "I was so sure he was the murderer," Izzy hissed. "I couldn't wait for the rest of this stupid school to figure it out. I knew he would try to kill again. I took things into my own hands. I left you, John, to follow him and make sure myself. But when I arrived, he was in a classroom with the ladder, trying to break open the window and escape." My eyes went wide. The way there was a shattered window in one of the classrooms. The things Mark had said to the people when he took the ladder. Leaving us. Going to get out of this nightmare. He didn't mean those as a suicide wish. He genuinely meant that he was trying to escape. I thought this condemned him for sure, Izzy spat. He was always so intent on escaping. Who else would be so adamant about that, if not the killer everyone was looking for? Watching him try to break the window and climb out was enough for me to be sure of his guilt. I kicked the ladder out from under him. His head hit the ground hard and he got a nasty head wound. The blood on the ground under the window, I thought to myself, the way he was reportedly clutching his head. But it didn't kill him, Lilith spoke, taking her hand off her arm to reveal a hideous bruise before showing her leg, which bared a similar one. Her hair was still slightly wet with blood from a head wound of her own, something backed up by the blood in the corner of the room. He attacked me after that, Lilith continued, gnashing her teeth. After knocking me to the ground, he grabbed the ladder and ran out. That's the last I saw of him, I swear. You may sit back down, Lilith spoke to Izzy. That is, unless John has any further questions for you. I wish to resume questioning Penny. That's fine, I hissed, watching Izzy sit back down as Penny again walked to the center. But you cannot possibly have more questions for Penny. She was with you and Callie at the time of Mark's murder/suicide. She has a perfect alibi, one you cannot possibly debate. What are you getting at? Lilith took a long breath as her eyes slowly turned to look at me. They swirled with a sort of emotion I had yet to see in her. Sadness. Almost pity. I know, she spoke softly. In fact, the only one without an alibi for every murder was you, John. I staggered back, my eyes constricting into slits. What? I coughed, my eyes flashing to the crowd. The real reason I called Penny to the stand, Lilith continued, her eyes locking with mine, was to hear her assessment of the third body we found, the one that the murderer tried to hide. Penny, Lilith spoke. What did you discover about the body upon closer inspection? Izzy cut you off when she entered the room to tell everyone about the fourth body, but I think you had discovered the same thing I had. Penny stammered, her eyes flashing between Lilith and me. The clothes were a bit too small for him. What does that have to do with anything? I cried. So what if his uniform didn't fit exactly? When you shook my hand before the trial, Lilith spoke confidently. John, you had to roll back your sleeve. That shirt is too big for you. My eyes widened, my irises beginning to shake. You killed Sarah, Lilith continued. Then, after realizing all of her blood would not wash off of your uniform, you were forced to swap uniforms with Chris. You tried to hide him, but in the event he was found, you mangled his body to a degree where it was impossible to tell his blood from Sarah's. That way, he just looked like another victim. You're wrong, I hissed. Anyone could have done that. What about Max's note? If I needed one of Penny's assignments to forge her handwriting, it would have been impossible for me to get my hands on one. Max, Mark, and Penny were all in the room with her backpack, meaning I couldn't have possibly snuck in without being heard. There's no way I could have forged the note. Objection, Lilith shouted before turning to Penny. Penny, what did Mark say about your essay he got from your locker? My essay? Penny stammered. I don't remember. He said the last page was missing. Is that correct? Lilith continued, receiving a confirmation nod from Penny. Lilith turned back to the crowd, yelling out, I call Callie Ames to the stand. My heart squirmed, my breath catching. Before Callie even staggered all the way on stage, Lilith asked her, Callie, as the only other surviving witness of the events in that group, may I ask you what John was in possession of during the night of Max's murder? While you split off to check the gym, what was John allegedly doing? Checking the downstairs lockers, Callie stammered before her eyes flashed to me in outright horror and she continued in disbelief. He had the master key to all of the lockers. That meant he could have stolen that last page from Penny's essay from her locker. Lilith nodded. After stealing a piece of paper from another classroom, He killed Max and forged the note. Anything to say in your defense, John? The director spoke, his eyes falling on me. I stammered, my teeth gritting, my pinprick eyes vibrating as my hands clawed down my face. He does not, Your Honor, Lilith spoke. He then proceeded to kill Mark, staging the death as a suicide in a different room. He has no defense, because he is the murderer. Her gray eyes fell on me, the turquoise lying stagnant as she breathed out slowly. I'm sorry, John, she spoke. I twitched, my hands peeling skin from my palms as I scratched at them. I sunk to the ground slowly, darkness warping out from my body as the wood by my feet quavered with distortions. He killed all of his friends, Lilith spoke slowly. He would have done the same to me, the same to Callie. He is a monster. He lacks a motive because he did it for fun. Didn't you, John? A smile ruptured across my face, and I writhed in ecstasy as my eyes splintered wide and I hacked a slash of distorted air forwards. Lilith exploded in every direction, her torso skidding across the floor as her legs liquefied into ropey strands and misted blood enveloped the scene. I squirmed, staggering to my feet on pale limbs. Everyone in the audience was horribly stoic, not screaming in terror or scrambling for their lives. No, there wasn't an audience at all. And as I whirled back around to the director again, he wasn't there. Instead, Lilith stood in his place, her eyes concerned as she spoke out. John, are you okay? Darkness had enveloped the scene. No landmarks visible anywhere, just solid, abyssal blackness aside from her. My eyes went wide in panic, and I threw another slash forwards, watching as her body again fell to pieces in a horrid shower of gore. John, she reiterated from behind me, louder now. Are you okay? My eyes snapped open, the room rushing into view as my bed capsized like a boat in a storm and my nightstand flew across the room, shattering against the far wall with heavy distortions. I rolled across the reflective marble surface of the floor before coming to a stop in the center, gazing up at the hideously bright fluorescent lights. Several machines beeped in my peripherals, and I was vaguely aware that there was an IV needle in my arm. Where was I? Was this a hospital? What had happened? I tried to stagger to my feet, only to realize in horror that my muscles barely moved at all no matter how hard I strained. After several minutes of lying on the floor, the space slowly wound into focus. It was definitely some sort of hospital, although the walls looked to be boarded with some sort of steel plating, and several cameras stared back at me from every corner of the space. I tried one last time to stand, being able to rise to my knees after considerable effort. I coughed violently several times, placing my hands on my legs, feeling that the material was like something found in cargo pants. I blinked slowly several times before moving my hand away from a different colored fabric on my pants, revealing the text underneath. It read, Subject 76.
Ho-ho! Alright, so I kinda lied. The spin-off series does directly feed into the main series at some points. For example, that ending there was actually the first scene of Season 3, so that's exciting. I couldn't help but include that cameo, so sorry about that. It won't happen again. But I bet you're wondering where else this series can go if we've already figured out the murderer and it all turned out to be nothing but some kind of hallucination or dream or something. Well, ha! I say to you, just you wait.